It has been 1.5 years since I started writing my second album, and today I want to talk about why it's taking so long. Like, as a beginner or intermediary producer, you might say, okay, that is a very long time to write 10 tracks, but for me, it feels like it is not long enough. Now, first of all, I think my tracks are fairly complex in the way that they're written. There's some tracks that in and of themselves have over 300 sounds in them, so more than 300 tracks in the production project. But also the last 4 to 5 months now, I've been working on a process that I don't think many people do, and that is separate mixing. So what I'll do is I'll export everything out of the production project, import that into a different DAW, and then mix in there. And then I export it again and import it back into Ableton so that I can then go and do my mastering. And actually, part of the reason why I wanted to make this video is to just update you guys on the process. Since I actually stopped doing March Mixing Madness early, I do want to say that currently I am in that final stage of balancing everything before we can get into a real master. You can ignore the plugins that you see over here. I am going to delete those because that was part of a different recording. But I'm essentially doing all of the final balancing, making sure that all of the tracks work together and that it becomes more of a cohesive album tonally, to say it like that. That there isn't a track that has much more bass or much more high-end or much more mid-range than another track. And of course, after that, the final step is going to be to do the mastering itself. Now, after that, it's also going to take a long time to actually get to release. There's much more that needs to happen. Mainly, the thing that needs to happen is doing visuals. I still need to get a cover art, and I also want to take that cover art, have it be done in a certain way so that I can export stuff from there and then use that to animate actual music videos for it, in the exact same way that I did for my first album. And then, of course, we're gonna have the final preparations and all of the distributions and getting all of the marketing material ready and all of that stuff. So you can imagine that it's gonna take a while for me to actually start releasing. So as you can imagine, when it comes to the timing, there's two factors in it. One is, okay, you have to write 10 tracks. Imagine writing 10 singles. Like, if one single takes you a month to write, then writing 10 tracks alone takes 10 months, right? And that is almost all the time that we already have. But then there's also this massive amount of time where it's about making sure that the whole idea, that isn't the individual tracks that you're writing, are more of a cohesive body and that they tell more of a cohesive story. You can imagine that an album, it's not just a collection of tracks. It's more than just writing the 10 different tracks and saying, okay, here's track 1, here's track 2, here's track 3, here's track 4. You usually have a bigger idea with the album, a bigger story that you want to tell than just the smaller stories that are the individual tracks. So it's not enough to just write 10 tracks. You need to write 10 tracks that are cohesive with each other and that together form a bigger story, which is much more difficult. Not only in the way that we talked about before, in the sense that you have to make sure that they're balanced and that one doesn't have much more bass or high end than the other one in terms of the actual mixing and the mastering of it, but also just the cohesion in the storytelling of the track and just, finding out what the order of the track is going to be and what your idea was going to be behind the album. Finding all of that out takes a lot of time. And I think another reason why that is because I don't think it's good to plan this stuff. I think it's good to go with the flow. Especially with this album that I've written, I've noticed that when I started writing it, I wrote it with a completely different purpose in mind than what I'm ending up with. In the sense that I had this one message that I wanted to bring out. I had this one idea that I wanted to write about. And now going through it and actually exploring that idea, I've mainly concluded that I was wrong about my initial message that I wanted to publish, that I wanted to, or at least I should have thought of it differently. So you can imagine a lot of the length of this album for me has been trying to, re-identify the actual message that I want to tell to the people. You can imagine as you start writing your tracks for the album, as you start saying it's time to do another album, it's time to do another big thing. From the moment that you decide that, say that it takes you a couple more months to really start getting the first tracks together and really start getting the first ideas together, you're already going to maybe change your mind on the exact message that you want to tell, of course. The final thing that I want to talk about is thinking about, okay, when should I do an album? Because I think I have an actual good formula for this. When it comes to a release strategy, an album never makes sense, in the sense that it is always going to be a better release strategy releasing every individual track as a single as opposed to bundling it up as an album. One, because of this factor that it takes a lot more time to make a cohesive album out of 10 tracks than it takes to make 10 individual singles. And two, also because if you make 10 individual singles and you start one and then finish the single, release, start one, then finish the single and release, it is much better to draw attention that way and to grow a fan base that way than to just dump one massive project out there. Now, of course, maybe not everybody is thinking about a growing fan base, and you can probably already guess what then the reason would be for writing an album, and that is that it's much more personal, and it tends to give you a lot more space to tell the message that you want to tell as opposed to just one single. So just the extra artistic liberty is a good reason to do an album if you want to tell a bigger story, then you have the space to do that. But also, I think, personally for me, what I really like about albums is they are snapshots of an era of my production. And I'm probably going to move on from the style that I've written for this album from this moment on. I'm going to do some other stuff. I'm going to try some other, maybe even subgenres of psytrance, maybe like going into the slightly more nighttime stuff, going into more like dark full-on stuff as opposed to the full-on progressive that I'm currently writing, I would say. To be honest, I find it really, really hard identifying psytrance genres, and at some point, if you go into the real details, it's not even something that has like clear boundaries and whatnot. But I would like to think that for me personally, it would be very cool if I'm gonna be like 80 years old and I'm gonna have this set of albums that is like, okay, this is what I was doing in 2021, 2022, and then the second album that you've written is what you were doing in 2023 and 2024 and a little bit of 2025. I guess it's been longer than 1.5 years that I've been working on this album. I can actually check that when I started. Okay, so I looked it up and it's the 27th of August 2023 when I started writing this album, meaning that in like 4 months, it's gonna be 2 years that I've been working on this. So you can see it takes quite a lot of time to write an album. Anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this. Let me know if you did by leaving a like, and of course make sure that you're subscribed. Another way to support the channel is to become a YouTube member, Patreon member, or Twitch subscriber. That way you get early access to videos, access to presets that I make during videos, and many more benefits. So thank you if you do that, and hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.